Yeah, okay.
I'm in earshot and I'm recording.
Oh, great. Hey, Leanne's here, and Randall and Margarita and the Bowles family.
Aaron.
Hey, Aaron, welcome.
Hi.
All right, I'm showing 6:01 and 15 seconds. We'll go ahead and get you started. Folks, thanks for tuning in tonight. And our presenter, and I'm excited about this presentation. This is Chris Allgyer. Chris Allgyer is the president of the High Knob chapter of the Virginia Master Naturalists. He retired recently from Mountain Empire Community College. He was a math instructor, but I think his true passion is entomology, and especially he's especially knowledgeable of butterflies and dragonflies, damselflies. And tonight he's going to be talking about butterflies of the Southern Appalachian. So I think you'll enjoy this. See some good photography, and Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Phil. This hopefully will be fun, and I can try to live up to your expectations. I'm going to try to see if I can master the share now and bring up, there it is. That, hit share. And it says when prompted, select yes. Your screening is paused, it says. Let me bring it up here. Okay. Okay, are we seeing it now?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So from the beginning. All righty. Well, as Phil said, I'm not an actual entomologist, but it's been a lifelong hobby. And I love, when I moved to this area in 1972 from my home state in Western Ohio, I was amazed at the variety of butterflies that I saw, particularly a lot of the swallowtails and butterflies that I might see maybe 1 or 2 times in the summer up there. I was seeing, you know, dozens of them per day. And so maybe that's why I stayed here so long in Big Stone Gap in Appalachia. The photos I'm going to show are almost all of them are mine. They're taking a lot of them, of course, in Virginia, in my own home garden, but also in Northeast Tennessee and in Eastern Kentucky. Just go through some highlights of the various butterflies that we can find around here and some tips on how to identify some of the butterflies. Also, we're going to learn about a process called mimicry, which is key to a lot of the species that we see in our region. So let me go ahead and move along here. And I'm going to start with larger butterflies first and then move down to some of the smaller ones. This is a Pipevine Swallowtail, and it's very significant that we have a lot of these in our area. It's a bluish black butterfly, the swallowtails you can see on the hind wings, and there are a lot of them in our area, and that's important as we view some of the other species that we'll see. Here is the butterfly with its wings folded up. You can see the underside and notice the bright orange markings and the refracted blue colors of the underwings. It's not really pigment on the scales that gives it that blue coloration. It's the way the sun will refract off the scales to give those bluish colors. And of course, yellow and orange are often signs in nature of beware, and it's very true for this species of butterfly. The size can range from up to 5 inches in wingspan. These sizes that I'm listing are wingspans. And what I want to emphasize as part of my presentation are the food plants. You can't have butterflies unless you have their native food plants in your region. And some of these food plants, particularly if you're doing gardening, and we saw Shad's presentation on, and Phil as well, on native plants and their importance for pollinators and their importance for birds. Well, they're important as well for our butterflies to have the correct food sources for the caterpillars. So we see a pipevine caterpillar there, and larval food, well, it's called a pipevine swallowtail because its favorite food is a pipevine, also Dutchman's pipe, Virginia snakeroot. And these plants have toxins in them that make both the caterpillar and the butterfly very distasteful and toxic to anything that tries to eat it. And so a bird or another predator will learn pretty quickly that a dark black butterfly with some of these kinds of markings probably want to stay away from it because of the bad taste, and it'll make them sick if they do try to eat one of those. Here are a couple of pipevine swallowtails at Natural Tunnel Park in the spring. These are males doing what's known as puddling. Male swallowtail butterflies and some other species of butterflies will often be seen around the banks of streams and maybe mud puddles, various places, and they found that what they're doing is they need certain salts and minerals. You see their proboscis, their tongues are down, and they're gathering up necessary minerals and salts that they need for reproduction. And it's only the males that take part in this process of puddling. Here's another beautiful butterfly that's seen a lot around here, and it looks very similar. It's got the dark black bluish markings. This is the Spicebush Swallowtail. And it is one of the first of several mimics that I will be presenting today of the pipevine. The Spicebush Swallowtail is not toxic to birds and other animals, but it benefits from looking enough like the pipevine that most birds will probably leave it alone because they really can't see that much of a difference between the pipevine and the Spicebush Swallowtail. There are differences. If you look at the underwings, they have the orange markings, but there's a double row of them on the lower wings. There's the 7 kind of circles that you see on the outside edge of the wing, and then inside looks like there should be 7 marks, but there are only 6. There's a bluish area where the orange mark is missing. If you can kind of put my pointer there, if you can see that area there. And that's one of the keys to help distinguish it. They do have a polka dot body like the pipevine butterfly, and so it looks close enough as a mimic that it benefits from the fact that the pipevine swallowtails are toxic to birds and all. I love this caterpillar. In fact, I grow spicebush in my own yard. It's larval food plant is the spicebush, which have been blooming recently, the little pretty yellow blooms. And also they will feed on sassafras. And the top picture there shows a rolled up leaf that indicates that there's a caterpillar in there. The smaller caterpillars will sew up, make a little house to live in. They'll stay in there most of the day and usually come out and feed in the evening at times. A little caterpillar down below, and I'll show another picture in a minute. They're also kind of a mimic in that the caterpillar looks an awful lot like a snake. Those are not true eyes that they have. Those are just markings that make it resemble the head of a snake and all. Here is a caterpillar that I brought into my house to raise from the spicebush plant, and it's getting pretty good size now. Looking up out, it's really outgrown its little tent that it's been living in. And eventually, once the caterpillar reaches its final instar, then butterflies, of course, go through a complete metamorphosis. They start as an egg, then the caterpillar, which is basically an eating machine. All the caterpillar needs to do is eat, 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 and shed its skin several times to grow. And when it reaches the final stage, it stops eating, crawls off someplace, kind of changes color like this one, and then finds a place to secure with silken threads and go through the next process of changing. In insects, it's called a pupa, but particularly for butterflies, it's called a chrysalis. And after about a day of hanging like this, it will convert, and here is the butterfly chrysalis for the caterpillar. And about maybe 2 weeks or so, and the time can vary, depends on the season, out will come eventually an adult butterfly. And this is the butterfly that came from that chrysalis. I was trying to move it into a nice position. It latched onto my hand and said, "I like it here." So I held it for about an hour while it expanded its wings out and dried the wings before it went off to fly off into the garden. Here's a comparison of the pipevine on the left and a Spicebush Swallowtail on the right. You can see that they're not exactly the same, but they're going to be look enough a lot in flight in particular that it's sometimes hard to distinguish which one is which. Here is a picture of the underside of the wings. Again, a single semicircle of orange dots for the pipevine, and the double set of the orange dots with one missing in one particular place for the Spicebush Swallowtail. Here is our Virginia state insect. This is a butterfly that I was amazed how many of them were flying around in the mountains when I moved here from Ohio. I get a big thrill if I find one of these up in Western Ohio to add to my butterfly collection at the time. This is our Eastern Tiger Swallowtail. It's unmistakable. It's a large butterfly with yellow and black stripes. And we can see that it's pretty hard to mistake. When you see one of these, you know that's a tiger swallowtail. There's nothing else that really looks like it. Looking at some plants that I have feeding on, that's a marigold. And there are some marigolds and zinnias are relatively inexpensive, great plants for your garden to provide nectar for a large variety of butterflies. If you're planting your garden, I tell people one of the least expensive things you can do is just get yourself a pack of zinnia seeds or marigold seeds and put them out, and they'll provide a lot of blooms for a long time during the summer for butterflies. The Eastern Tiger Swallowtail, they range quite a bit in size. Ones I'm seeing right now in early spring are generally smaller. Later summer, they'll have maybe 2 or 3 broods, and the later broods seem to get larger. This is a male here that is puddling at a little place. And all the larval food is very prevalent around our mountains here. Tulip poplar is one of its favorite foods. Black cherry is another. So there's no shortage of food for the caterpillars. On the bottom is a caterpillar that is on a poplar leaf. kind of resting there. And you see the little orange thing sticking out from its head. The true head is kind of hidden. Again, these eye spots are not real eyes. They are there to maybe resemble a predator. The little orange things coming out are osmeterium, which are little scent glands that they'll flash out when disturbed, and almost look like forked tongue coming out of a snake, but they'll show up real fast and startle whatever might be trying to get the caterpillar. This one's a little upset at me when I picked up the leaf to take a picture, and so he flashed his osmeterium out at me. Here is a female. It's feeding on a butterfly bush, Buddleia, which is a good nectar source. That I have a few of these in our yard, and they provide great opportunities to photograph butterflies. The reason I know this is a female is on the lower wings, those very vivid blue, almost like a necklace, those blue dots that form a very pretty little pattern there on the lower wings. The males do not have that. If I go back a couple slides, can't go back easily on this, so we'll do that. But the males will not have those brilliant little blue markings there. But here is where we get into mimicry again. In this region, through the Appalachians, and particularly in areas of the country where there are lots of pipevine swallowtails, the tiger swallowtail has adapted where many of the females take on a dark morph form. The males never do this, but the females, particularly in later summer, you'll see probably more of this form of the female than you will the yellow and black female. Why did that happen? Well, I'm not sure how it happened, but there's a benefit from that. These females resemble the toxic pipevine, and so they're benefiting by mimicking the many pipevine swallowtails that are in our region. Dark morph females are lovely to see. Here is the underside of the dark morph female wing. Again, it's on a butterfly bush there. Notice that if you look carefully, you can see the black striping that would appear if it was a normal yellow with the black stripes. And notice it has the orange dots that on the underside, which again mimic the pipevine swallowtail. One difference in the bodies of the tiger swallowtails do not have the polka dots. They're more solid black. Here is another dark morph female tiger swallowtail, and this is pointing out the pollination aspect of butterflies, that when this particularly, to get into this daylily, it's got to get its tongue down in there where all the good nectar is, and to do that, it's got to brush up against the pollen. You see the pollen covering its wings. Recent discovery I saw on it was either Nova or Science on PBS, did a really neat program. If you ever get a chance to see it, it was called Sex Flies and Butterflies. And one aspect of it talked about how the tiger swallowtail butterfly is the chief pollinator of the, I knew it, forget the flame azalea. That's what it is, the flame azaleas, which we see throughout our mountainous regions. A beautiful plant, and it's the primary pollinator. Turns out the bees are not able to very easily pollinate flame azaleas, and it was a student up at professor up at Stanton that recently has realized that the tiger swallowtail butterflies are the chief pollinator of flame azaleas. I thought that was interesting. This kind of demonstrates how they would get into a blossom like that to spread the pollen. Here's another mimic of this. Is another dark black butterfly with orange dots. Looks like some of them we've seen before. Got the polka dot body. This is the eastern black swallowtail. It benefits as a mimic of that pipevine swallowtail, and so they can fly around knowing that predators are probably going to stay away from them because we have so many of the bad tasting pipevine swallowtails in our area. Here's one, a male is more brightly colored on the top side of its wings. This was at Natural Tunnel, I believe. I found that one there. They're a little smaller than a couple of the other species of swallowtails that we've seen. But they have a really neat caterpillar that when I garden, we always have dill in our garden, hoping that the caterpillar will show up there. It's one of its favorite food sources. They also like anything in the carrot family, Queen Anne's lace, parsley. So there's one in a dill plant that I photographed a few years ago. In fact, I raised the caterpillar into adulthood that we saw earlier. This is another caterpillar. I think this is my brother-in-law's parsley plant that has been topped off very well. So, you know, some gardeners may not like that. My feeling is I want to grow as much as I can of the food source. I can easily give up a few parsley plants or a few dill plants to have these beautiful caterpillars in the yard, and then eventually watch them become butterflies. There's the caterpillar doing its little silk girdle and preparing itself to make a chrysalis eventually. Here's an adult that came from one of those caterpillars in our yard, and it's enjoying a zinnia. If you get the zinnias, make sure you get the ones that have those bright yellow little things. That's where the nectar is, and those particular varieties of zinnia butterflies really love and enjoy. Here's a female, got this off of red fennel. Paxton bought one at a garden place, and we found a little caterpillar on it. I moved it from the fennel to the dill to raise it, and she came out a couple years ago. And notice the female again is not as brightly colored as the male, and is more closely mimicking the toxic pipevine swallowtail to benefit from that. It looks a lot like a dark morph tiger swallowtail, but the polka dots on the abdomen help tell me it's not the female tiger swallowtail there. Comparison between Spicebush and blacks. These are easily confused because they both have the double row of the orange spots on their under wings. They both have the polka dot bodies. If you look closely though, the Spicebush on the left has that missing spot in the orange circles, where the Spicebush has more of them, and also has a little red dot here, down here at the lower part of the wing. So there are some differences, but you can see these are easily confused until you get a close enough look at the two. And they both benefit from mimicking the pipevine swallowtail. Here's a swallowtail don't see very often in our area, but they are found around here. And this is the one photo that I've got that is not from the Appalachians. This is from Western Ohio, in my hometown, of the giant swallowtail. It's the largest butterfly in North America. And it's nothing else looks like it. Gorgeous butterfly. See one. Last one I saw was at the Cedars in Lee County, but it wouldn't land. So many times I'll see one, but they are hard to get a photograph of and all. I did have a caterpillar one summer feed on some rue plants in our herb garden. That's one of the foods. In the deeper south, they are actually considered a pest of citrus trees. Orange, lemons, limes, they will they can be a problem there. But around here, we don't have citrus trees, but we have trees like prickly ash, rue, hop tree, and they are occasionally found. If you're lucky enough to see one, it's a great sight to find. Here's a butterfly you will see a lot around here. In fact, I saw a couple today, and that is a zebra swallowtail. They're out and about now, the early springtime form of them. That's a gorgeous butterfly. It has the longest tails. You look at the lower wings, the tails are much longer than any other swallowtail that we have. Pale kind of color striping. See where it gets its name of resembling zebra striping. They're a little smaller than the other swallowtails, and they only have one food source, and that is a pawpaw tree. So if you see a zebra swallowtail, then you know somewhere within a few miles there must be pawpaws growing and all. They will nectar. They're kind of tough to photograph, I found, because a lot of times they don't want to stop flapping their wings. They're often a blur when I try to get a picture of one. Did find one on the Big Stone Gap Greenbelt last spring that decided to rest right before sunset, and one on the bottom. I was able to get some nice photos. I've seen some people get photos of the males puddling too. They'll often be seen with other swallowtail groups doing the puddling. All righty, move away from swallowtails now to probably the best known butterfly. If you ask people to name a particular butterfly, the name Monarch will probably come up more than anything else. Gorgeous bright orange butterfly. And this is another butterfly that is bad tasting to birds and predators. Notice they also love the zinnias. It's got its proboscis in there getting a good drink of nectar. Danaeus plexippus, 3.5 to 4 inches in size. The one in the top picture there is a male of the species, and the distinguishing feature of the monarchs to know it's a male on the lower wings are those little black circles there. I'll point to them here, right there and there. Those are little scent glands. We're really not sure what their real purpose is, but only the males have those, and that can distinguish the gender of your monarch butterfly. And most of you probably know the larval food plant is anything in the milkweed family. We have several native species milkweeds around here. Common milkweed, the swamp milkweed has different names, and the orange butterfly weed, one of my favorite perennials to grow, are there. This particular monarch here, notice the frass, the droppings underneath this guy. A lot of times I'll spot the droppings of caterpillar before I actually find the caterpillar. And so there's a word you can add to your vocabulary. Insect poo is known as frass. And also here's a monarch caterpillar that was in our yard several years back. I think it's growing on the swamp milkweed, the incrinata milkweed, and it's fed enough that it's attached itself. It hangs upside down in a classic J posture when it gets ready to pupate. And then it will eventually wiggle out of the caterpillar screen and form a chrysalis, beautiful green and gold color. Very, no other chrysalis kind of looks anything like that from around here. It'll take about 10 days or so. And the day that they're ready to emerge, this particular type of chrysalis will turn transparent, and you can actually see the butterfly shape inside the chrysalis. This was an early morning photo that I captured. Had to go to work that day. I was still working, so I missed this one particular emerging, but I did find some other ones. Here's another one that newly emerged from its chrysalis. And I chose this picture to look at its tongue. The proboscis of a butterfly, excuse me, is in two sections. Excuse me again. It's kind of like a straw that's been cut lengthwise. And when they come out of the chrysalis, one of the things they have to do is fit that tongue together into one straw so that they can eventually go out and sip their nectar. And so this one was curling and uncurling and getting its proboscis set up in order to eventually, when it did make its flight, to be able to start drinking the nectar. And in fact, here's one, a male that's again enjoying a zinnia. And also, the monarch, again, I mentioned, because it feeds on the toxic milkweed plant, is distasteful. And the orange coloration, again, will probably tip off animals to stay away from me. I don't taste good. Here is another butterfly, very similar in color, a little bit smaller, and it was given a common name of a viceroy. I guess someone said, well, we got a monarch, what do we call this one? It looks a lot like it, and they called it a viceroy. And the viceroy has the orange and black and white markings, but it also has this semicircle on the lower wing, about halfway along the lower wing, that the monarch does not have. And it's that semicircle there that, or arc, that helps you distinguish as the viceroy. When I was a kid, we were told Viceroys were Batesian mimics of the Monarch, and like the others, there's a term called Batesian mimicry that we've been discussing, where one species will resemble the other one and benefit from that. But there's another type of mimicry called Mullerian mimicry, and it's recently been found that Viceroys themselves don't taste good. They also are distasteful, and so they don't need to look like a Monarch, but it probably doesn't hurt, and the Monarchs can benefit from the Viceroys being distasteful, and so they both share the characteristic, and that's Mullerian mimicry. Here's a nice picture of the upper side of the Viceroy. Again, look at the lower wing and see that black semicircle going through there. That's the key descriptor of that. I don't have any photos of caterpillars yet. I keep hoping to come across and find one. They'll feed on willow, poplar, apple, a variety of trees. There's one there with if you look carefully at that bottom picture, there's a little bee that's photobombing my picture of the Viceroy there on. So I keep hoping to find a caterpillar of these one day, but I haven't been able to photograph one yet. They have a very interesting larval form. Here is a cousin of the Viceroy. It's the same genus, but look at the coloration on it. This is called a red spotted purple. And this particular genus of butterfly, if we were in New England, it would be called a white Admiral, and it wouldn't look like this at all. It'd be dark, but it'd have very bold white stripes on it. But in areas where there are lots of Pipevine Swallowtails, particularly as you move further south into our region, this butterfly has adapted to mimic the Pipevine Swallowtail. It doesn't have tails, but it's got those same colorations. There's enough similar colorations that it benefits as a mimic of the Pipevine. Here you can see the underside of the wing has some of those orange markings that are warning signs. This, again, being the same genus as the Viceroy that we saw, has similar larval food plants, willow, poplar, apple, and birch, and a variety of things that it can feed on. It's shown nectaring there on butterfly bush. This butterfly I'll also often find on rotting fruit in wildlife. If you have apples drop down from a tree or things, they like to enjoy fruit as well as the nectar from flowers. And I did find a chrysalis of one of these using my nightlight and discovered one of these. So it's a very interesting looking chrysalis of the red spotted purple in the lower picture there. All righty, moving along, let's move now to another group of butterflies known as fritillaries. And this is a really common butterfly in our area around here, the great spangled fritillary. If you recognize the plant it's on the orange butterfly weed, which is in the milkweed family. If there's one perennial I would advise you to get if you like butterflies to put in your yard, and other pollinators as well, and Chad talked about this as well. This is a native plant in our region, and it is a perennial and just a wonderful source for pollinating plants and all. And it seems like fritillaries particularly like to come, and I see them every summer on these plants. Great spangled fritillary can get up to 4 inches in wingspan. There's one resting in Natural Tunnel I found a while back, and Paxton found the caterpillar one time. The caterpillar, the food plant is violet, so we know around here that's not a problem. There are lots of violets throughout our mountains. Some people see it as a pest in their own yards because it can spread itself very well. The caterpillar basically stays hidden during the day and will only come out at night to feed. So you rarely see one. We were cleaning out a flower bed one time and Paxton came across this one. So it's my one photo of the great spangled fritillary caterpillar. It's a pretty little thing. Here's one of my favorite photos that I got of the fritillaries. This shows, I like this one because it shows both the silvery underwings with the wings folded up and then the wings open. You can see the contrast in those. And again, it's on the favorite plant of the butterfly weed, milkweed. Here's a very tiny fritillary called a Meadow Fritillary. I haven't seen these until recently. I'm seeing more of these. Generally, they stay out in the meadows and don't come into my home garden very often. This one is feeding on an herb that I grow in the garden. It's oregano. And that's another thing to think about plants that will attract butterflies and attract pollinators, is to grow a variety of herbs throughout your garden and let some of them bloom. Oregano can have pinkish blooms, can have white blooms, and they seem to be full of nectars and often very full of bees, and particularly smaller butterflies seem to enjoy feeding on them. Meadow Fritillary, it's like most fritillaries, it's going to feed on violets. Here are a couple shots of one that came through my garden. Again, it's on the oregano blooms, those tiny little herbal blooms. And again, lots of bees and butterflies seem to enjoy them in the summer. Here is another fritillary, Variegated Fritillary. And with the recent warming of our climate, I'm seeing more and more of these move further and further north into our region. And all. When back in the 70s and 80s, rarely saw this butterfly. Now you see them every year as our climate has been changing. And basically our summers are warmer and all. The caterpillars will feed on violets, but they also feed on pansies, violas, and passion vine, which again is a native plant. I have not found any caterpillars yet on our passion vine in our yard, but we have had some. This was on a Johnny Jump Up viola a few years back, and I found a few caterpillars and decided, well, I'll raise them and kind of protect them, because most caterpillars, the lifespan of caterpillar, probably over 90% of them don't make it, from a variety of things that might get them. Birds and also other insects, predatory wasps, predatory flies. And so very few caterpillars make it to adulthood. So a lot of times I'll try to bring some in to help protect them if I can. And this one we brought in. Eventually it got good size, ready to form its chrysalis. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful chrysalis. The markings on it, I think, are spectacular colors on the chrysalis in the top right corner. And I was able to sit outside a few years back and actually capture the guy crawling out of this chrysalis. Didn't have video at the time, or I would have videoed it, but there it is coming out of the chrysalis in the lower picture. And here it is hanging then and drying out and expanding its wings before it took about an hour to dry out and then fly off. One thing you may have noticed about some of these butterflies, insects are supposed to have 6 legs, right? Well, there's a whole group of butterflies called brush-footed butterflies that you look at them and you're only going to see 4 legs. The front 2 legs don't fully develop. They're like little brushes. They can be used for tasting and some other things, but the front 2 legs of a lot of butterflies will not develop, and so they look like they basically have 4 legs. They have 6, but the 2 front legs are undeveloped on there. Here is a dream. This is on the list of a lot of people who collect butterflies or want to find butterflies, and it's only found in a few places in the world, including our Appalachian Mountains. This is the Diana Fritillary. It's a pretty good sized fritillary, has the gold and black and brown markings, and this is a male. I've seen maybe 7 of these in my life in the 40 plus years that I've been living here in far southwest Virginia. I never find this in Ohio because it's not found in western Ohio where I grew up. But here's the amazing thing. This is violet, is this food plant. The top one is another male. It's on a butterfly bush, came in my yard a few years back. The bottom one is the female of the species. And look what has happened. Somehow or other, these brown and black butterflies, the female form has changed into another mimic of a Pipevine Swallowtail. It's got the dark blue and black coloration, and how this happened, we don't know when it happened, but it has. And so I've seen 3 of these in my life, and lucky enough one came through, and I was in the yard at the time to get some photos of it. I know lots of people in the eastern part of Virginia will travel to western Virginia and into our mountains hoping to find this butterfly. It's on their life list, and it's exciting to know that we have those flying around here. Here is another picture of her. She had some damage to the lower wing, but I wasn't concerned about that. She was still doing well, and see, she's drinking up the nectar from the butterfly bush. Her tongue has been coiling in and out there. Beautiful butterfly. Hope to see some more of them someday. Here is a butterfly that's been out and about this early spring. This is a Mourning Cloak. Again, it's another brush-footed butterfly. You can see only 2 legs there as standing there, and it's got its tongue out trying to get some nutrient out of the wood. This is at the John Fox Jr. house. Pax installed this. The Mourning Cloak is one of several types of butterflies that will kind of hibernate. They live as adults during the winter, and they kind of hunker down between bark or inside piles of leaves or something. On cold days, they shut their metabolism down. They have kind of a natural antifreeze that they don't freeze. Gets warm enough, they come back out for a little bit, and there may not be flowers around, but they will feed on scat and other things, rotting materials, and come out in early spring to form first brood. And then they will have another brood, and then the brood in the fall will again winter over to the next season. They're kind of camouflage here. They have some gold trim. If you're lucky enough to get one to open its wings, beautiful, beautiful markings. The Mourning Cloak, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, for the colors of mourning from the church. This is an old world butterfly. You'll find these in Europe as well as in the Americas. Has several larval foods that are trees that we have a lot around here: willow, elm, poplar, and all. The bottom picture I just took a few weeks ago up on the Pine Mountain Trail, Pound Gap. This was a kind of an old beat up Mourning Cloak, but showing there it landed in a rocky area there, and was able to at least get a photo, but it was practicing social distancing. I couldn't get more than about 6 to 8 feet close to it before it would fly off, and wouldn't really let me get a good photo there. Moving along, some other butterflies that we'll see occasionally in different areas, the emperors, the hackberry emperor, the tawny emperor. They both feed on hackberry. A lot of insects like the hackberry. These were both found at St. Paul at the start of the Sugar Hill Trail, and they're very similar in markings. The eye spots on the one on the left make it a little bit easier to identify. Don't see these a lot. They often found around water, and of course places where hackberries are growing. They like to sit out on rocky places and sun themselves. One of my favorite butterflies, of course, growing up in Ohio, the Buckeye state, is the common Buckeye. And there's been a resurgence of them recently. I usually see a few every summer, but the last few summers, and not just in our area, but also in eastern Virginia as well, they were all over the place. Seem to be doing quite well for whatever reason. Unmistakable colors. It's a medium-sized butterfly, but the eye spots of the Buckeye make it easily recognizable, and it's a beautiful creature. Got a couple shots feeding on butterfly bush again. Larval food, snapdragons, toadflax, plantain, and also they seem to be doing quite well the last few years, finding a lot of them. Here's another butterfly that will winter over, and like the Mourning Cloak did, this is a question mark, getting its name from the silvery question mark on the lower wing. When the wings are folded upright, they're very brown and not very colorful. You see the little hook and then separation in the dot. That is a question mark. Again, these butterflies I'll see sometimes in February, in March as they come out on warm spring days. Here's a photo with his wings open. See the colorations on the open wings, very, very pretty. Nettle and elm in particular, hackberry. There's a picture of the chrysalis of a question mark butterfly. It has a relative known as the comma because it doesn't have the little separate dot on the silvery spot on the underwing. It just has the comma shape. This comma is on a bucket handle that I was working in the yard and perspiring a lot, and it was sipping off the salts from my perspiration is why I think it landed there in the bucket. You see its tongue out there as it's getting some of the salts that I left on that handle. You know, there are a couple other species of commas. There's a green comma, there's a gray comma. I haven't run into those very often, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not always sure I can tell the difference between some of those rarer species on those. They're food plants, again, nettle, elm, hops, and they often like to perch on things and sit. They're kind of social friendly butterflies. If you get one to land near you, they often will come back and like sun themselves. The one on the bottom was at the High Knob Naturalist Rally this past fall. Was hanging around the place. There are 3 genus Vanessa butterflies in our region. This first one is the painted lady, known as both an old world and a new world butterfly, and they migrate even greater distances than monarchs. There was a huge migration last year in Colorado of these. It actually lit up the radar screens of these as they migrated to the south. And they migrate from Northern Europe all the way down to Africa. And also they are kind of an amazing butterfly in our region. The food plants are thistle, hollyhocks. Here's a picture of some of them on a butterfly bush and on a, what is the other plant there? Looks like one of our native fall blooming plants. It has a, yeah, ironweed. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you, Shad. That was an ironweed, definitely. Here is in the spring, this is feeding on chives that I grow in our garden. And when I first saw this thing land, I thought, that's another painted lady. I got lots of pictures of painted ladies. And then I thought, well, no, I'll go over there and just take a picture. I don't have one on the chive blossoms. And then when I got there, I realized, no, that's not a painted lady. That's the American lady or American painted lady that is there. It's, again, same genus, Vanessa, but this is Vanessa virginiensis. I see them now. They seem to be making a comeback in our region. I've seen a lot of them around the Norton Reservoir area and all. It's a very, very pretty butterfly. Again, showing things that you can grow in your garden. An early spring bloomer is our chives. And of course, it's a nice plant to have for your food, and you can actually eat the blossoms as well. But the blossoms do attract a lot of butterflies. And the third Vanessa species is probably my all-time favorite because as a kid I used to find these, and they're very friendly butterfly, the red Admiral. This butterfly with its red markings found throughout our region, early spring through late fall. They have several generations of them. This one's at the top of the White Rocks on a hike that Phil led a while back there in Lee County. And they come to our yard and garden, and the bottom one was at the High Knob Naturalist Rally in the late fall. Its food plant are nettle and thistles, and if you see some particularly nettles with the leaves folded up, sometimes inside those folded leaves, of course, nettles are kind of painful to kind of handle and all that, but they'll fold up like the Spicebush Swallowtail caterpillars do. You sometimes find caterpillars inside the nettle plants. And this butterfly, again, is so friendly. They love people, and they'll actually land on you, or they'll stay nearby. It seems like they seem to like being around people. Sulfurs are the yellow butterflies that are out and about now. I just saw one recently and got a photo. This is the orange sulfur, enjoying a zinnia plant. To really identify, you almost need to see it in flight to catch enough of the orange when the wings are open. Most of the time they keep their wings folded upright. It's very hard to see. So identification of this species is very tough. They'll feed on alfalfa, clover, other legumes, but there's another butterfly that looks almost the same, and that's a clouded sulfur. They're marked. In fact, a lot of experts can't always tell. I can't always tell whether I've got a clouded sulfur or an orange sulfur unless I've seen them in flight, and then I can see the clouded sulfur won't have the orange on the outer wings that the orange sulfur seems to have. There's also a white form of the clouded sulfur shown in this picture. Their food sources, again, alfalfa, clover, and all. They might be considered a pest in the Midwest because of the amount of alfalfa they can eat, but again, I don't think that's an issue we have to worry about and all. I've found them a lot of times around the clover and all. There's a larger sulfur butterfly that, again, due to our changing climate, I rarely saw this in the 80s, started seeing a few of them in the 90s, and recently they seem to be all over the place. It's called the Cloudless Sulfur. And one characteristic of these is the long proboscis that they have. Look at the length of the proboscis as it arches up and comes back down in the flower. They're noted for that very long proboscis shape. They're a little bit larger than the sulfur, the other sulfurs that we saw. Food plants, Senna, cassia, woody legumes. Here are a couple more pictures of them. Beautiful butterfly, and we're seeing more and more of these in our area. Again, I think it's because our climate's gotten warmer, and they seem to be multiplying in our region. You know, most of you may know this butterfly and probably don't like it. This is an invasive species. Not much we can do about it. It's worldwide now. The cabbage white came from Europe and has found its way throughout the world. This is a pair of them making more cabbage whites. And of course, if you're a gardener, you know that these are going to create the problems for your cabbage, your broccoli, your kale, other cruciferous plants. We're not going to be able to get rid of them. They're here to stay, and we just got to deal with them. Gardeners can use floating row covers. I think is one of the best natural ways to keep these butterflies from laying eggs on your cabbage and broccoli. There you see a picture of one of the butterflies. They are a beautiful butterfly, and this one's feeding. The one in there is feeding on garlic chives, which is another interesting plant to grow in your garden. The chives have a garlicky flavor to them, but the white blooms are beautiful, and starting around August through September, maybe late July through that, and they attract a lot of neat pollinators and butterflies. And it's a pretty little plant to have. One warning, they go to seed and they can spread quite a bit around there. We have some native white butterflies, rarely seen. This is a West Virginia white. Got this picture of St. Paul a while back. And it's a native little white butterfly. And there are pockets of them around our region. They don't have the black dots on them. Here's more on the West Virginia white. Not a great picture of flapping its wings in, but I haven't seen too much. They feed on toothworts in the mustard family. And the problem right now that's ongoing, you've seen the garlic mustard, an invasive plant. Now's the time to be pulling those suckers up and getting them out of your area. They're starting to bloom now. Pax and I took a lot of them out of the Greenbelt area recently. But the problem with garlic mustard, besides taking over, I know it's a tasty plant and some people enjoy it. That's why it got over here in the first place. But our native butterflies have not adapted to this European invading plant. But they'll lay eggs on them. The West Virginia white and a couple other of our native white butterflies may lay their eggs on the garlic mustard, thinking, oh, that's a good food source. but the caterpillars are going to be poisoned by the plant. They have not evolved and adapted to that kind of plant, and so that's another reason to protect our native butterflies. We need to remove the garlic mustard from our region. Here are a couple other white butterflies. The checkered white. I've seen a few of these. That's feeding on a mint plant. They seem to like the small blossoms. And a couple of years ago, I was able to get my one and only photo. They're around. They're up on Pound Gap right now. They've been flying around there, of the falcate orange tip. This is another butterfly that's threatened by the mustard or the garlic mustard plant. It feeds in the mustard family, rockcress, wintercress. Both of these do. And so they'll benefit if we can remove the invasive garlic mustard. Falcate orange tips are lovely little butterflies, but they hardly ever land to let you take a picture. It took me 30 minutes of chasing around before I was able to get a picture of one of those. There were dozens of them flying around, but they never land and pose for photos, it seemed. Now we go to some woodland butterflies. The northern pearly eye. Found this at Natural Tunnel. I've seen them on a couple other hikes through Wise County and places. It's a pretty plant. The larval food plant are grasses. Nice size. Don't see them a whole lot, but when you do, you'll remember the lovely, lovely markings on these brown butterflies, well camouflaged in the woods. There's a whole group of woodland butterflies that are camouflaged like that. Here's a rare butterfly. This is the Cleveland Barrens. Northern meadowlark. That only time I've ever seen one was on a hike at the Cleveland Barrens, and that's one area where they're kind of, there are little pockets of them around. Small butterfly, exciting to find. I had to get my book out for a while to figure out what this one was, and that hadn't happened too often, but it was a neat find. Butterfly you do find a lot around right now, two of them that look very, very much alike. Tiny pearl crescent larval food plant are asters, particularly New England aster, and silvery checker spots. And larval food plant that has sunflowers, which nice to grow in your garden and hopefully be blessed from caterpillars. Very similar in appearance. There are some markings that you can learn to help identify those. We're running kind of low on time, so I'm not going to go into more of that, but you can find, I've got a book I'll show you at the end of this that is a great resource for those who want to find more about them. Here's a nice woodland butterfly, should be out and about pretty soon, if not already, the little wood satyrs. Lovely markings. Don't find them with their wings open very often like that. Usually their wings are folded upright, like the picture here on the left, showing the size of it. That's on a Virginia creeper leaf there, so you can get an idea of how small that butterfly is, less than 2-inch wingspan, feeds on grasses and sedges. And it has another similar butterfly that's common in our area, a little bit smaller, called the Carolina satyr. And these should be out and about now, finding them. Again, they camouflage themselves very well in the woods and leaves and all, but they are out and about and will be throughout the summer. There'll be several broods of those. The common wood nymph, I see them from time to time, but hardly ever get a chance to photograph. This is one blurry photo that I was able to capture years and years ago on a slide, and I've scanned it since then. They are another butterfly that's notorious hard to get a photo of. The gem satyrs, I find them every year at Natural Tunnel in one location. They seem to be, once I found the first one, I've gone back and sure enough, there's a very tiny butterfly, again, less than 1.5 inches wingspan. And they often will be like the one shown there along the ground, in woods, in the leaves, well camouflaged. You know, other small butterflies that I really love, and you see these gray hair streaks, and there's a whole family of hair streaks. The red-banded hair streak is on the right on the garlic chives. The gray hair streaks on a little red clover bloom. Notice both of them are perched upside down. Their heads are pointed down, and the hair streaks are on the tails. And what you don't see here is they are constantly moving those tails back and forth, The thought is that that will resemble maybe antennae, and the markings there will resemble maybe their head, and a predator might go for that part of the butterfly, maybe get a mouthful of wing where the vital organs of the head and the antenna are down below and therefore protected. The hair streaks have that usual perching style. Very pretty little butterflies. Here's a couple other species of hair streaks, a hickory hair streak and a juniper hair streak. Juniper hair streaks are kind of a greenish shade, and their caterpillar will feed on red cedars. Very nice thing. Lots of azures out about right now, and I'm not sure which ones these are. These are the most confusing butterflies to try to ID. There's a spring azure, an Appalachian azure, a summer azure. But the summer azure might be out in the spring azure might be seen later on in summer. They all look very much alike. They have the bluish wings when their wings are open. And they're out and about right now. In fact, the one on the left I photographed up at Mountain Empire, it's feeding on bird poop, of all things. Flowers aren't out yet, but it's getting its nourishment from the bird dew there. The smallest little blue butterfly we have around here is the eastern-tailed blue, almost like a hair streak, but slightly different. That's on a little white clover. Again, I'm down on my hands and knees crawling along and hoping it wouldn't fly away to try to get a close-up photo of that guy. Here's a photo one, a rare photo of one sunning itself with the wings open. Beautiful blue colors there. Its larval food plants are clovers and cowvetch, and this butterfly seems to be thriving. They seem to be doing quite well. See them throughout the year. Finally, we're going to wrap things up. We're getting close to the end here. There are about 70 different species of butterflies in our region that might be around. I haven't shown you all of them. I haven't been able to photograph all of them for that matter. There's another 30 or so species of what are called skippers. Skippers are considered a type of butterfly. They're in the Lepidoptera family, but they have characteristics of kind of fat bodies that make them resemble moths to a little extent, but they are considered more butterflies. They're out in the day. Here's one on garlic chives again. This is the one skipper that's easy to identify. It's the largest one that we generally see around here. Commonly, it's called the silver spotted skipper, from the bright white markings or silvery markings on the under the lower wings there. It has a very nifty caterpillar that if you look on locusts in particular and see folded up leaves and you carefully unfold them, you'll see this very interesting looking caterpillar with its dark head, and those are not true eyes, but they have those little orange dots that resemble eyes. It's a really nifty caterpillar to find. They're usually folded up inside the leaves. You can find them on the locust plants in particular, and they are thriving in our area. Almost a 2.5-inch wingspan on some of them. You know, there's a pair of them there on the butterfly bush. Again, you can see them. It's one of the easier practice. It's the only really easy skipper to identify. There are lots of other skippers. Again, there are probably about 30 of them in our area. I'm not going to go into all those. I've finished with a slide here showing there are grass skippers, or clouded wings, or dusky wings, or sooty wings, and some of them are really, really tough to distinguish. I think I've got a Horace's dusky wing in the top left, and the bottom left is, I think, a fiery skipper, and I think I've got another dusky wing there. I'd have to go back and look to be sure what we found there. I'm saying I'm too old to learn all the 30 different skippers and figure out which ones are which. I'll try. Sometimes I can ID some of them. So we're just going to leave the skippers to finish out the main things on butterflies. As an old teacher, I've got to do a quiz here. If you want to turn your sounds up there. We've got several species, butterflies. What are they doing here? Remember the term. This is a few years ago at the Pinnacle Natural Area. Anybody want to venture a thought?
Puddling.
Yes, they are puddling. Very good. And so what gender would these butterflies be since they are puddling? If you remember, only the males are going to be the puddlers in the species. Now we've got I think 3 different species of swallowtails here. One of them should be very easy. There are 2 of them there that were very easy to identify. There are the Virginia State insect. Anybody want to venture?
Eastern tiger.
Yeah, the Eastern tiger swallowtail, or the yellow with the black stripes. Now the one on the far right, if you look carefully under wing, there's just a single arc of those orange dots. The one next to it is a double arc of those orange dots. When you look very carefully, there's on the inside part, there's a blue space here where the orange dot is missing. So one of those is a species that we started with, and one of those is a mimic that's benefiting from looking enough like it. We'll help you out here. Anybody remember the one that tastes real bad because it feeds the one I started with? It's the Pipevine Swallowtail is the one on the far right there. And that's the one that's distasteful. And the one that's mimicking right here, because it's got 2 orange semicircles on the wings with a spot missing, that is the Spicebush Swallowtail. Now the other ones, I think this is another Spicebush, the one kind of in the center that's dark there, and the one in the very back, I'm not sure, I don't think there's enough information to make out what that is, but at that particular time, there were 3 species of swallowtails all puddling at that same site, and also we did pretty well on that. Final information here. Here is a Pipevine Swallowtail again, a single row. It's getting nectar on a thistle. This is a bark camp this past summer, and was lucky enough to catch it just right with the refracted blue markings on that. Probably my favorite picture I ever took of a Pipevine Swallowtail. Anyway, if you want some good resources for insects in general, my favorite place to go is bugguide.net. You can spend, particularly as you're social distancing and staying inside, you can just find about anything you want to find out about insects, and pictures and photographs and all. It's a huge repository of photos of various insects. My favorite book or field guide for butterflies is called Butterflies Through Binoculars, and get the version for the East Coast, the East, by Jeffrey Glassberg. I highly recommend that book if you're really serious about, I think it's the best guide that I've seen, and I refer to it an awful lot. And I'm listing my email there, chaoslefty@gmail.com. I welcome people to send me insect photos or things that they're trying to help identify. There are some good sites on Facebook to identify insects, and of course you've got iNaturalist, which is another good site as well. But I welcome folks to send me pictures of any kind of bug that you think you found that looks interesting, and if I can ID it, I can help you maybe find where to ID it as well. So I just like seeing what's around, and we'll welcome getting pictures of things. So questions? I'm going a little bit past time. I was afraid that would happen.
Chris, there's a few things in the chat box.
Okay, let me find the chat box. If I can find it here and bring that up. Okay, I'm on a different screen here. I guess I need to shut down my PowerPoint. Get back on that, and then let me bring this out. Down there. Okay, I'm trying to find my chat box on here now.
Should be right next to the share screen button.
Okay, I'm not seeing the share screen button anymore. Let me see what I'm finding here.
On mine, it's down at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, I know. I saw it earlier. I found it earlier. I'm trying to bring that out. Show large. Let's see. Show video. All I'm seeing here is the main prompt and the I've got a little thing in the corner, and I'm trying to make it big.
Well, let me just read them to you.
Okay.
One was clarify what instar means for folks.
Alrighty. Instar are the various stages of the larvae. So when the first little caterpillar comes out of his egg, that's called the first instar form. And then it'll feed, and then it'll grow a little bit larger, and then it will shed its skin, and out will come a new caterpillar. And sometimes the caterpillars will look different. The different instars won't always look the same. Now, monarchs pretty much all look the same, but some of your other swallowtails, they will change colors and change a little bit as they molt. And most butterflies either have 4 or 5 instar forms. The last instar is the one that will eventually become the chrysalis. For butterflies, they're called chrysalis. For insects in general, that form is called a pupa. For the moth, it would be called a pupa. But for butterflies, they use the word chrysalis. So the final instar caterpillar will turn into the chrysalis. And by the way, caterpillar is a term you only use for Lepidoptera, that is moths and butterflies and skippers. The larvae of other insects that go through metamorphosis have their own specialized names. A beetle larva would be called a grub usually, and the larvae of a fly is called a maggot. And so you have different names. But for butterflies and moths, the larva form, that's when you use the term caterpillar.
Okay, you used the term mimicry multiple times.
Yeah.
And how do we know that it's mimicry as opposed to them just being close kin?
That's a good question. The thoughts are, and again, in some cases, it's very clear. Like, why would the yellow and black tiger swallowtail females at some point start turning that dark black color? And they also notice that they're more prevalent in areas where pipevines are. So it's kind of the science of looking and deciding, well, they must benefit from looking like that particular animal. And the same thing with that Diana Fritillary. The fact that the female of the Diana Fritillary has that blue-black color, that gave it an advantage. And and what was the advantage? Well, it probably had the advantage because it closely resembled that pipevine swallowtail. So the mimicry again is, and they do population studies to see that these butterflies are thriving more so in areas where pipevine swallowtails exist, and so they must be benefiting from the fact that they resemble it.
Is it possible that because they morph so easily, and you gave that Diana as an example, if they morph that easily, is it possible that it could be dietary or some environmental factor, something that they're ingesting?
Well, I don't know, because they're feeding on the same plant as they're feeding on violets, the same as the other fritillaries are, but that particular species, and it may just been a fruit that, like the genetics changed on one, and, we have a lot of genetic changes, and most of them don't work out for the good, but some of them will have benefits and are carried on by the later offspring, and that's evidently what happened at some point. There had to be a Diana Fritillary that female that had that dark form and passed that gene along to her offspring, and they benefited from that. Again, this is thousands of years of evolutionary change has taken place to develop those characteristics. Again, I'm not the trained entomologist, so I'm just going by what I've read and studies. I did again see recently that the fact that the butterfly for the Monarch and its mimic, the Viceroy, that was thought at first to just be ordinary baits in mimicry, and then they've done some studies, particularly in Florida and some other places where there are lots of Viceroys, and they're saying that they have a mutual benefit because the Viceroys themselves have bad taste, and so that's why that mimicry is a different kind of mimicry called the Mullerian type of mimicry, and that's only maybe 20 years or so that was and studies were done looking at various populations to see that where there were Viceroys, they were benefiting the Monarchs, and the Monarchs were vice versa benefiting the Viceroys.
Okay. That Cloudless Sulfur was the one that I had seen migrating, and I was curious. Every year we see those Cloudless Sulfurs going due south. And
yeah, they will.
So do we know where they are going to?
Well, they're just going to warmer climates in the Gulf Coast regions where it was warm enough they can still live and breed there. The same thing's happening with the painted ladies. The painted ladies are just going further south. They're not going to one spot like monarchs. The East Coast monarchs all go to those areas in remote Mexico to winter over. But there are other butterflies that will migrate, and they'll just move further south because it's getting too cold and they know they can't breed. The plants are dying out, so they go further south and can live there. And then once the spring comes and starts warming up, then their offspring will start moving back up to the north. And again, because of our warmer climates and warmer springs that we're getting, I'm seeing butterflies coming up north much earlier than we used to see.
Have you been to the mountains? I think it's like the San Cristo Mountains or wherever it is in Mexico.
No, I'd love to go there. I've never been in Mexico, but if I was going to go to Mexico, that would be the one reason I'd want to go there.
Phil, that might be, we occasionally set up tours, and when the world returns to a semblance of normal again, that might be a really cool thing to schedule. Would be a trip there to see that.
Yeah, I've seen the videos and all, and I'm sure it doesn't do it justice, but it does seem awesome to see all those monarchs. And of course, monarchs are threatened to a certain extent. That's why many states are encouraging farmers and all to, you mentioned leaving plants along the edges of your fields, and certainly trying to promote the milkweed because that is the only food source that the monarchs have. So there's been a large movement with schools and all to promote milkweed growth, and hopefully it'll help. But there are lots of other things involved with the it's a complicated process of why monarchs seem to do well some years and not as well other years. Last couple of years have been very positive signs, at least for the East Coast monarchs. The monarchs on the west of the Rockies are down to about 10% of what their population at one time was. They have not been doing nearly as well. That they don't go to Mexico. They go to Southern California, various places to migrate, and for whatever reasons, their numbers have drastically declined.
That orange tip that you referenced, I actually saw one lit out on the Raven's Nest Rock up there, just past where we took the tour that day.
Yeah. That is a good spot for them. They're all up and down that where we had that tour. I was there 2 weeks ago, and there were lots of them around. But again, you got to be in the right place at the right time and really quick with your camera to get a picture of them sometimes, because those males don't last very long.
There was a question here:
those falcate orange tips all over at my house? We've had a whole lot of them, and I'd never even noticed them before this year. And
oh, that's very
there's
cool.
so many of them.
Yeah, I've seen some. The nature guy at Warrior's Path has gotten some good photos of some of them over the years that I've seen. They seem to be pockets of them, and but they are nifty. I'd never seen them until a few years ago, because they're not a butterfly that's going to come to your garden and nectar and flowers and all. They're in early spring, and so you've got to go to where they are. They're not going to come flying into your yard unless you're.
What do they feed on again?
The various plants in the mustard, I think a toothwort of some kind. I've got the slide closed down here, but and they are in the mustard family, and that's why the garlic mustard is so dangerous to them and some of our other native white butterflies. So if you see garlic mustard growing around where they are, don't be afraid to pull that stuff up and get it out of there, because it's toxic to the native white butterflies that feed on things in our North American garlic or mustard type plants.
Chris, the Bowles family was asking, do caterpillars drink water, or do they normally obtain sufficient fluids from the plants they eat?
That's a good question. I think they might, gather up, the normal dew and things that's going to be on the leaves. I'm sure as they ingest it, they're going to take in some fluids of some kind. But when I raise the caterpillars and bring them in, I will always kind of mist the leaves periodically that they're feeding on to make sure that they're getting a little bit of moisture. And they probably can ingest some of the water there with that. But I'd have to look that up for sure to see how they do that. Basically, their mouth parts are chewing machines, and they just chew and feed on leaves. So I'm sure they're getting the moisture from the leaves themselves as well. But I'll have to find out more about that. It's a good question.
Thank you, Chris. You did a great job. I don't know if there's any other questions.
Well, they got my email, so chaoslefty@gmail. So if there's something that you want to know about, I'll welcome hearing from you, and keep those. It's a fun thing to go out and search for butterflies, and again, putting in enough plants in your yard to draw them in. It's kind of like people who are birding. There are people who go butterflying and create life lists, and it's been an enjoyable hobby for me for many, many years. So I always welcome the chance to talk butterflies and insects in general. So maybe a few weeks I may be doing something on the dragonflies and damselflies. So see how that goes.
You've gotten a lot of compliments on the job that you did, so thank you.
So this is a fun program. I really appreciate you guys and the extension doing this. It's a good idea.
Very good. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in, and hope you have a good evening, and we will have a class again tomorrow night at 6. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good night.